And now for our next news special report.
Now let's dive into a story that's igniting conversations nationwide. Imagine a presidential candidate turning the tables on the mainstream media. That's exactly what happened when Vivek Ramaswamy, a name that's becoming synonymous with fearless truth-telling, faced off against NBC reporter Dasha Burns. What started as a routine interview escalated into a riveting showdown, challenging the narratives that were often fed. We've got not one, but two jaw-dropping clips that you absolutely need to see. Ramaswamy didn't just respond. He dissected and dismantled every question with the precision that left the reporter and viewers in awe. This isn't just about a clash of opinions. It's a masterclass in confronting bias and redefining the conversation on race relations. Stay tuned for these explosive moments and don't miss my final thought or reflection on why this story isn't just news, but a moment of truth for our republic. Now, folks, before we dive deeper into our special report, a quick yet important note. The uncompromising news coverage that we deliver daily, well, it's empowered by our dedicated sponsors. Just like Vivek Ramaswamy's relentless challenge against superficial media narratives, we also confront issues head-on, and today it's about excess belly fat, a deep-seated problem much like the obscure truths in media narratives. Now, this fat isn't just about looks, it's a health risk, pressing against life's vital aspects. That's why many, including myself, are turning to a groundbreaking solution. It's scientifically designated for reducing fat storage and boosting metabolism. And here's the best part, a 51% discount for the rest of the month. Grab this opportunity at trimwithgary.com. That's trimwithgary.com. Back to the story now. In today's media landscape, where narratives often overshadow facts, what we witnessed between presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy and NBC reporter Dasha Burns was not just a mere interview. It was a striking example of media bias and the distortion of race relations in America. Now, remember, this is a white woman lecturing an Indian about white supremacy. Just stop and think about that for a moment. The irony is palpable and the implications are profound. Let's watch.
Let's talk about white supremacy and what happened last night for a moment, because when you were talking to reporters last night, you called white supremacy a myth. When someone asked you about Dylan Roof, you said you didn't know who that is. Have you looked up what happened in 2015?
Yeah, look, I said this last night. Invidious racial discrimination is wrong no matter how it happens. But if a Washington Post reporter is asking me almost like a catechism, whatever question I said, I'm against invidious racial discrimination, whatever form it takes, but says, do you denounce white supremacy? It's incumbent on us for us to define what white supremacy is. I wrote my book, Woke Inc., and I've written about the detailed understanding of what the popular understanding of these terms have come to mean. Do you believe punctuality is a vestige of white supremacy, Dasha?
Look,
because if you don't, then you have a disagreement about many of the people who are defining those terms, or the written word, or the use, or the nuclear family. These aren't my words. These are the words of intellectual proponents from Ibram Kendi to the Ayanna Presleys to BLM that have said these are vestiges of white supremacy. So
Mr. Ramaswamy,
we can't have it both ways.
What you do, though,
we have to have an honest discussion.
Straw man arguments. Last night you brought up Jussie Smollett as the best example of white supremacy.
Was the hottest thing in news in the back of a fake actual attack on him that we have to contend with.
And yet you have examples like the Buffalo shooter in New York just in 2022.
You have other examples.
But you are also cherry picking when you bring up Jussie Smollett.
I'll look at all of the statistics. More black on black crime. If you really care about actual crime against black Americans, let's get to the root causes of it in the inner cities of this country.
The Anti-Defamation League tracked a 38% increase in white supremacist propaganda last year.
Who's tracking that?
The Anti-Defamation League.
Yeah, the ADL, I don't think is a particularly credible source when they have cherry-picked information.
When we're talking about
I would suggest look at there's a table, 2x2 table. Federal law enforcement data, which you could say what you do. Maybe we shouldn't believe that either. But look at black on Asian crime, black on black crime,
the FBI
white on
hate
black
crime statistics. That's a law enforcement agency. 59.1% was based on race, ethnicity, and ancestry, saying hate crimes rose 12% between 2020 and 2021.
Look at the absolute crimes themselves. What they classify as a hate crime is itself a political judgment. I think that when you actually care about protecting life, if you want to say Black Lives Matter, let's look at where black lives are actually being lost. It's in the cities, at the heart of other black Americans and criminals that are restrained by the absence
that we talk about as well. But are we supposed to ignore white supremacist hate crimes?
We're not supposed to ignore any kind of crime, Dasha. That's what I say. But what I see is a selective reporting. Take the Nashville Transgender Shooter Manifesto. Every shooter manifesto in a mass shooting has been released within 48 hours, except for that one shooter in Nashville. Now, it ended up being leaked. What do you see? It wasn't a white supremacist. It was somebody that was actually making fun of using derogatory terms. I believe.
Okay, so why are you okay talking about that manifesto and not talking about the manifesto from the 2015?
I'm more than okay talking about both. But what I'm asking is, why is the mainstream media suppress that one? Why did the police suppress that one? Why was that the one shooter manifesto that of all of the mass shootings, every other shooter manifesto has been released? I'm focused on that one because that's the one that's been hidden from us. And it comes back to the point of my candidacy and the way I'm going to run this country. Trust the people with the truth. If it doesn't match your narrative,
the reality is right now,
I think the media did not hold the police accountable. They would have been demanding that.
Starting to gain traction with the black community, with Latino voters. Do not worry that your rhetoric is pushing them away. There are folks
to the contrary. I think we're going to bring black people into this movement.
Who are concerned about your rhetoric.
Well, you know what? I'm concerned about their corruption. If you had somebody who actually one of the most prominent black influencer the other day, what did she say? I've been black my whole life, and this man could actually unify this country, in response to a long exchange I had with a black pastor who had an event here in Iowa, did challenge me with a hard question, asking me, are my views against affirmative action, how do those align with historical racial injustice?
Affirmative action is a debate that is being had.
If I may just finish my point,
deal with
Dasha.
racism,
I think I will be better
positioned. But you're denying that racism is a problem.
I've never denied that racism is a problem. And if you listen to the response I gave to that black pastor, my whole point is racism has been a major problem for most of our national history. But we're getting close to the promised land that Martin Luther King envisioned. We're as darn close to it as we ever have been. And so what bothers the heck out of me is it's right when we're close to that promised land. Martin Luther King said it, I may not get there with you, and he didn't get there with us. But I think it desecrates the legacy of our civil rights movement, desecrates the legacy of Martin Luther King, that right when we get closest to the point of having racial equality and gender equality and even opportunities for people of minorities of many types, are we perfect? No. But are we as close as we've ever been? Yes, we have. To then obsess over systemic racism, to then obsess over white guilt and otherwise, we're creating new waves of racism, Dasha, that we otherwise would have avoided right when we're closest to having achieved what even the proponents of the civil rights movement would have dreamed of. That's what bothers me. My exchange with that black pastor about a week or so ago, right here in Iowa, not far from where we are, it was in Indianola, not far from where we are in Des Moines, was that we're founded on the pursuit of a more perfect union. The pursuit of liberty, equality, and justice for all. And I reject this left-wing narrative that's creating more artificial division. So I believe I will bring more black and Hispanic voters into our movement, not by saying fake poll-tested slogans, but by speaking the hard truth, that we've been imperfect in our past, but let us celebrate the progress we've made and reject the media's cherry-picking narratives to actually get to the truth of the matter. And now if we care about black lives, the things we're going to do isn't obsessing about white supremacy. It's actually fixing the problems in our cities, which I will do as our president.
Masterclass. Now, what you just saw was more than a heated exchange. It's a mirror into the prevailing media attitudes. Vivek Ramaswamy, a man of Indian descent, faced a barrage of questions from Burns, who seemingly aimed not at understanding, but at cornering him with a preset narrative. It's a classic example of how the media often frames discussions on race and violence, particularly white supremacy, in a way that fails to address the complexity of the issue. Ramaswamy's response was not just articulate, but illuminating. He confronted the narrow perspective, challenging the very basis of Burns' questions. His references to figures like Ibram Kendi and organizations like BLM were not just rhetorical flourishes. They were critical examinations of how the terms and narratives around white supremacy are shaped and used in public discourse. The confrontation goes beyond the simple liberal versus conservative dichotomy. It's about the struggle for intellectual honesty in the face of a media landscape that often prefers sensationalism over substance. Ramaswamy's emphasis on defining terms like white supremacy strikes at the heart of the issue. He exposes the fluidity with which these terms are used, often to fit a particular narrative rather than convey the truth. Now, the interview was less about exploring Ramaswamy's views and more about painting him into a corner. Burns perhaps exemplifies a media trend where the goal is not to inform, but to provoke. The attempt to trap Ramaswamy in a narrative of denial or ignorance of white supremacist violence was met with a well-reasoned and factual response, highlighting the media's often one-dimensional portrayal of such complex issues. Ramaswamy's reference to punctuality and the nuclear family as alleged vestiges of white supremacy isn't just a random example. It's a critical examination of how far-left progressives have expanded the definition of white supremacy to include aspects of everyday life, diluting its meaning and impact. This broadening of terms has significant implications, not just for public discourse, but for how society understands and addresses these issues. Now, the heart of his argument lies in his ability to articulate the often overlooked root causes of racial tensions and violence in America. By shifting the focus to inner-city crime and its impact on Black Americans, he underscores a crucial aspect that's frequently ignored by the mainstream media. This is not about denying the existence of white supremacist violence. It's about acknowledging that the problem of racial violence is multifaceted and requires a nuanced understanding. Now, Burns' incredulous reaction to Ramaswamy questioning the credibility of sources like the Anti-Defamation League reflects a broader issue in media reporting. The unquestioning acceptance of certain sources as authoritative without a critical examination of their biases and methodologies is a problem that pervades much of today's journalism. Ramaswamy's challenge to this approach is a call for more balanced and objective media landscape. Now, the interview also touches on the shifting political landscape, with Republicans gaining traction among Black and Latino voters. Ramaswamy's approach to these topics, characterized by a refusal to conform to expected narratives, resonates with a growing segment of the electorate tied to traditional political rhetoric. His focus on corruption within the GOP and his candidness in addressing these issues sets him apart from many of his contemporaries. As a candidate of color in the GOP, Ramaswamy's unique perspective and willingness to engage in tough conversations about race set a new standard for political discourse. His approach is not about scoring points or fitting into neat ideological boxes. It's about fostering a genuine understanding of complex issues that affect all Americans. His ability to unify disparate voices, as evidenced by the supporters that he's garnered from influential Black influencers, speaks to his appeal beyond traditional party lines. Ramaswamy's narrative isn't just about confronting liberal media bias, it's about bridging divides and bringing a fresh, thoughtful perspective to the national conversation on race and politics. So this brings us to another crucial moment in Ramaswamy's interaction with the media, further illustrating his adept handling of bias questioning. Here's the interview that sparked the one you just saw. Take a look.
You didn't say that you condemn white supremacy.
I'm not going to recite some catechism for you. I'm against vicious racial discrimination in this country. So I'm not pledging allegiance to your new religion of modern wokeism, which actually fits the test. I'm not going to bend the knee to your religion. I'm sorry. I'm not asking you to bend the knee to mine, and I'm not going to bend the knee to yours. But do I condemn vicious racial discrimination? Yes, I do. Am I going to play your silly game of gotcha? No, I'm not. And frankly, this is why people have lost trust. And I know you're going to go print the headline tomorrow. I already know this. We already know how your game works. Vivek Ramaswamy refuses to condemn white supremacy because you asked a stupid question. The reality is, I condemn vicious racial discrimination in this country, but the kind of vicious and systematic racial discrimination we see today is discrimination on the basis of race in a very different direction. You want to know what the best way is to end discrimination on the basis of race? Stop discriminating on the basis of race. Do that, and we're going to move this country forward. And I don't care whether you're black or white or brown or anything in between. That's how we're going to unite this country. You people have been responsible for dividing this country to a breaking point, creating a projection of national division. I meet people from the south side of Chicago to meetings like this one of every shade of melanin, multiple, from man to woman, doesn't make a difference, who are hungry for reviving unity in this country. And you, with your catechism that you try to get to politicians to whatever fake headline you're going to print on the basis of this conversation tomorrow, that's what's dividing this country to a breaking point. Shame on you. Look people in the eye and tell them what you've actually failed to tell them for the last 5 years. Own the accountability for your own failures as the media. That's how we rebuild trust in this country. And until then, I don't have a lot of patience to play the games.
What do you expect from
Beautiful. Now, in that clip, the brilliance of Ramaswamy's strategy is evident. He anticipates the reporter's tactics and counters them effectively, showcasing not just his understanding of media games, but also his commitment to addressing all forms of racial discrimination. This isn't just about deflecting criticism, it's about redefining the narrative and refocusing the conversation on what truly matters. His encounter with a Washington Post reporter is another example of his ability to navigate media traps. The question about condemning white supremacy, a standard query posed to many candidates, is turned on its head by Ramaswamy. He not only condemns all forms of racial discrimination, but also calls out the media's hypocrisy and how they approach the topic. The narrative that the media consistently tries to build around candidates like Ramaswamy, especially those who defy traditional racial and political stereotypes, is telling. It reveals a deep-seated bias and a reluctance to engage with viewpoints that challenge their preconceived notions. In this context, Ramaswamy's encounters with the media are more than just interviews. They're a testament to his skill in navigating a media landscape that often seems more interested in sensationalism than substance. His ability to remain calm, articulate, and focused in the face of biased questioning is not just commendable, it's a blueprint for how conservative voices can effectively engage with and challenge mainstream narratives. If you got value from this report, tap subscribe. My final thought is next. Now tonight we've witnessed more than just an interview. We've observed a masterclass in confronting media bias. Vivek Ramaswamy's performance was nothing short of exemplary, a shining beacon for those seeking truth amidst a sea of skewed narratives. His calm yet unyielding manner, his sharp intellect cutting through the fog of media spin, sets a new standard for public discourse. It's high time we praise such candor and clarity in the political arena. The behavior of the media in these interviews, intent on entrapment rather than enlightenment, deserves our unequivocal condemnation. As Ramaswamy marches towards the Iowa primary, he carries with him not just the hopes of a campaign, but the respect of those yearning for a genuine, unfiltered voice in politics. We wish him luck, not just for the success of his campaign, but for the triumph of a narrative that reflects facts over fiction, substance over sensationalism. This is what our republic needs now more than ever.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Now keep up your quest for truth with this next news report. And if you found our channel enlightening, join the millions who agree with you. Tap subscribe. Thank you for watching the Next News Network.